I want to share a story. It's February of 2019. I'm 29 years old. I'm in my fourth year working at Uber, and I'm sitting in the front office of my physical therapist in Seattle, Washington. I'm waiting to hear back on an email about the success of my promotion. I had worked 60 to 80 hours a week for 3+ years, thinking that I deserved this promotion. I had helped launch new markets. I had helped hire new people. I've helped configure and set up all of our systems to help scale the company. I thought I'd done everything right. There was one sales director who was really key to the entire decision process, and I thought he had my back. A couple of things, though, that I didn't quite appreciate. The boss that had hired me and for whom I had worked for 3 years had recently left the company. I had just moved to Seattle because I was sick of living in San Francisco, so I was away from the main decision-making nexus of the company. And as I was sitting there waiting for my appointment, I received an email that said, "No dice." I was not granted a promotion. My 3 years of work, of dedication, of supporting the company's mission, of traveling all over the world, doing everything I could to make them successful, not good enough. And then 7 months later, I was laid off just before Christmas. And looking back on that failure to get promoted, I was so upset. I was so frustrated. I was crushed. I spent the rest of the next 5 to 6 months just obsessing about it, making a lot of noise, and quite frankly, pissing a lot of people off and not really doing what was expected of me. And even now sitting here, I still get that bile rising up in my throat about it. God, I just wanted it. But I didn't get it. And so what I'm going to do here now is something that I recently did with someone I met here in DC. He's in his mid-20s, starting a career as a product manager, got a new job, and he asked me for some advice. I'm still trying to get over the fact that I'm now somebody people ask advice for about their careers because I still feel like I just graduated college, 2 weeks ago. But it's not the case anymore. So I've got 5 lessons here I want to share about making your early 20s a success in whatever career you're in. So number 1 on this, I think, is understanding expectations. I didn't know what it actually took to perform at the next level in my career ladder. All I was doing was just working as hard as I possibly could and thinking that that was going to be enough to get me to that level. It's a good instinct. You do want to work hard, but the thing is that you want to work hard on the things that matter. And so my advice here is understand what people expect of you and what your employer expects of you, and always focus on doing that first and doing it as best as you possibly can. Meet the expectations. Understand them, meet them. The next one is you have to build real relationships. People often say it's not personal, it's just business, often wrapping a very crushing thing like a layoff in a very dull platitude. But the thing that people miss is that business is relationships. And I also know that a lot of people who say those things also say it's not what you know, it's who you know. And in my experience, that's very true. It is who you know, both externally and also internally. I'm not going to risk my livelihood on somebody or something or some business that I don't trust. I'm not going to stake my reputation on it, and I'm certainly not going to stake my job on it. Similarly, your coworkers aren't going to do that either. I moved to Seattle from San Francisco because I was sick of living in San Francisco. It was really expensive. I didn't feel very good when I was there. And so I wasn't where the decisions were being made, and my boss, who had managed me for 3 years, was no longer there. And I had lost my biggest advocate when that happened. And the sales director, who had a lot of sway over the process at the time, lived in New York. And looking back on it, as much as I still feel a lot of frustration and anger towards this person, I have to admit that I don't think I did a good enough job building a relationship with this guy and showing him how I was benefiting him and his job. I thought he had my back, but if I look back on it, I was just a loudmouthed, irritating kid who was agitating for a promotion, and I wasn't doing anything to actually contribute to his business, to his number, to helping reduce his stress. I wasn't doing any of that for him. He didn't know what I was capable of doing, so why would he stick his neck out for me, thereby risking his reputation? When you need help, ultimately, that's going to come from your coworkers. No person can do it all by themselves, and having the relationships internally and externally to make your job easier is so key. A lot of us live in a remote world now where most of your interactions happen over Zoom, and I don't really know how to build effective relationships over Zoom. All of my instincts tell me that relationships are best built in person, face to face, through shared experience. But I also know that my own experience is just that. It's my own experience. And I wish I knew better methods for building those kinds of relationships over Zoom. I'm not good at it. All I know is that it is important to find a way to build real relationships with the people you work with. Number 3 is that everything is a learning experience. If you're asked to do something that's not in your job description, try it. Set realistic expectations about your capability and your perceived ability to do something, and try it. It's going to do a couple of things. Number 1, it's going to show people that you are willing, and willingness, honestly, is 80% of the battle. And number 2, it's going to show you how you solve problems. And that is going to carry over into every other part of your life because you're going to experience problems everywhere. You know, how do you pay rent? What are we going to eat tonight? I'm having a fight with my sister. You know, all this stuff. And being able to fall back on the experience of, oh, I had this challenging thing I didn't know how to do, but I went after it, and this is how I solved that problem, that's going to serve you both in your career and in the rest of your life too. If you see somebody struggling with a problem, listen to them. You might learn more about what their role is, why it's stressful, why it's important, and it's going to give you new perspective that might help you be more empathetic and more effective in what you do. Actually, this might actually be another piece of advice that dovetails very nicely with this is listen as much as you can, especially when you're young, especially when you're new. I know the temptation to be in your 20s and to think you know everything and deserve everything. It's a natural part of the human experience, and it takes work, it takes effort, it's difficult to do. But ultimately, if we're not learning, what are we doing? Next up is don't stress too much. Losing your cool, losing your head because you're stressed is an exquisite way to piss people off. It's also a really great way to degrade your own performance. Even if you're in a high-stress occupation like you're a trauma doctor or you're a firefighter, being stressed and giving into that is a great way to decrease your ability to effectively do what you need to do. In an office job, you really have a choice of how to respond, and the advice that I give to my own team is that just focus on your job. It comes back to understanding the expectations, and if it's a stressful situation at work, as long as you continue to meet the expectations of your job and the expectations people have of you, everything is going to be okay. Don't let the stresses of other parts of the organization or other people infect your ability to stay focused. If someone is frustrating you, take a walk outside. If you're worried about deadlines and not being able to hit them, reprioritize with your manager. The correct response to stress is personal action, not reaction. And no matter what happens, the sun is going to come up tomorrow. And when you're in your 20s, chances are you're going to be pretty low on the corporate totem pole. And there is something that's good about that, actually. It's that the expectations and the responsibilities that sit on your desk aren't really make or break. That's not to say that you're not important. It just says that your piece of the pie is easier to manage. And number 5, and this is the piece of advice I wish I would have given myself every single day when I was in my 20s, is be easy to work with. If people like how they feel when they're around you, they're going to want to be around you more. They're going to want to help you more. I was a pugnacious and entitled shithead when I was in my 20s, and it pissed a lot of people off, and it really held me back. Being kind to people should always be a way of life and not a strategy for some end goal. If you focus on it in that lens, it's going to come off as authentic, and it's going to really, really strengthen the feelings people have towards you. And similarly, another thing I've learned is that the kindest people are often the smartest people. Being kind is really challenging. It is so easy to be mean, to be jaded, to be cynical, to lay on the horn when you're frustrated in traffic, to leave a nasty comment, to judge people. It's the most basic default setting that we have. To be kind, to be supportive, to be optimistic, it takes work and it takes creativity. And if you focus on doing that work every day, it's going to make you better at everything you do, and it's going to make people want to help you. So there's actually something pretty close to home that I think illustrates a lot of these lessons. The Wizards and Capitals, the basketball and hockey team here, are owned by this one guy. His name is Ted, and he's been in the national headlines about wanting to move the teams out of downtown DC and over into Virginia. That deal ultimately fell apart, and he actually signed a new deal to keep the teams in DC for the next, I think, 25 years. And one of the key things that he referenced about why he came back to the table and ultimately signed this deal is because the mayor of DC, when it came out that Ted had a handshake deal with the Virginia governor to make this happen, the mayor didn't default to stress, anger. She didn't have a bunch of outbursts. She didn't drag him through the mud. She didn't publish a lot of angry stuff. What she did was she focused on what she had to do as the mayor. She passed a bunch of bills. She started imagining a future without Ted and without these two teams in downtown, and she always kept it cordial. She was easy to work with. She understood the expectations of what she was trying to do, and she didn't stress. She just performed. And at the end of the day, she secured another 25 years of having those teams in downtown DC. I'm happy to say that I've recovered from that failure to get a promotion back in 2019, even though it still stings. And I've gone on to be a manager of both small and large teams, and now I'm 2 or 3 levels up the corporate ladder from where I was back then. And as much as I want to say it's because, I worked really hard, or I was really smart, or I made all the right decisions, I think ultimately what it came down to is I learned how to be easier to work with. I learned how to understand the expectations that were put on me. I didn't stress too much. I built relationships with my coworkers and with people both above and below me, and I took every opportunity to learn, and I still do it. All right, that's it. 5 lessons for when I was 29. I'm wondering what I'm going to be saying to myself in another 5 years. All right, it's taken me 5 minutes of takes now to figure out how to end this video. So, okay, bye.